September 4th. Welcome to the September 4th CAAB meeting. We have a busy agenda, as we tend to say. We're going to do a roll call, and since we have a few new members, we're going to do some brief introductions. But first, before we get started, just some reminders. This meeting is being recorded. Please identify yourself when talking so we can make sure we have accurate minutes. The chat function is disabled due to public disclosure rules. You can select to turn on closed captioning if that is something that you need. And then you can lock participants, but it seems though, Abby, that you may have locked everyone's screen so that we can see both interpreters and the PowerPoint. But if you need to adjust your screen, it looks like there's some instructions to do so.
Yes, I did that so that when we record, both ASL interpreters will be shown, and this was per request by David.
Great, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, so like I said, we have some new members in the last several months, so we thought we'd take just a few minutes to do some quick introductions along with roll call. So Abby, do you want to help facilitate introductions with the folks there in the room with you?
Yeah, absolutely. We only have one person in the room today, Amy Rourke, and I figured we could just, as I call your name, just give a brief introduction of how long you've been on the CAAB and any other affiliations that you'd like to mention. So we'll get started in the room here. Amy Rourke, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Amy Rourke. I am the community representative from District 1. I've been on the CAAB since 2019. Hello?
Great, thank you, Amy. Now I'm just going to go down the list. So is Diana Perez here?
Yes. Hi, I'm Diana Perez, Vancouver City Councilwoman. Pleasure to be here with everyone.
Thank you, Diana. Alicia Topper?
Yes, good morning. I'm Alicia. I'm one of the elected representatives serving on CAAB.
Thanks, Alicia. Rob Perkins?
Oh, I'm here. Rob Perkins, serving on CAAB as the elected official from District 3. I'm on the Evergreen Public Schools Board of Directors.
Thanks, Rob. Ernie Sutz?
Yes, I'm here, Washougal City Council, and glad to see everybody back.
Great, thank you, Ernie. Joyce Cooper?
Joyce Cooper, an elected official. I think it's not 6 or 5 or 6 that I represent. I'm on the Green Mountain School Board.
Great. Jamie Spinelli?
Good morning, I'm Jamie Spinelli. I'm the low income rep for District 1, and I am also the homeless response manager for the city of Vancouver.
Thanks, Jamie. Karen Cameron?
Good morning, Karen Kamaroff, low income rep. I think it's either District 3 or 5 at this point. So 2, totally wrong. Yeah, good morning.
Clover Spears?
Hi, I'm Clover Spears. I represent EOCF, and I just started on the CAAB. I think it was like April or May, so I'm new.
Megan Mulsoff? I am not seeing Megan. And Faye let me know that she is out today. David Poland?
Hi, my name is David Poland. It's my sign name. Born and raised in Vancouver, and I represent the deaf community at large.
Thanks, David. Nakia Hunter?
Hello, my name is Nakia Hunter. I cannot remember my district, and I am the vice president of NAACP here to represent the BIPOC community.
Great, thanks, Nikia. Melanie Green?
Hi, I'm Melanie Green, and I'm board chair, and I'm a community representative for District 4. And I think I've been on CAB since 2018 or 2019, so it's been a while, and I have to look every time to see which district I'm in because I always forget. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Melanie. And Brittany Lassane?
Hi, good morning. I'm Brittany Lassane. I am the community representative, I believe, for District 5 and also the CEO at YWCA Clark County.
Great, thank you. And then we have one new member who's joining us. We're still waiting on their appointment to be approved by the county council to be an official board member, but Lily Skukova is here with us today. Lily, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, I'm here. My name is Lily Zukova, and I'm recently decided to join in District 3, I believe, community representative. It's an honor to be here.
Wonderful, thank you, Lily. All right, Melanie, looks like we have a quorum, so I will pass it back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Our first order of business is the approval of July and August minutes that were sent out by Abby, I think the end of last week. Hopefully everyone got a chance to review those. Can I entertain a motion for approval?
I move we accept the minutes of August.
Thank you, Ernie.
August.
Oh, I heard a second. Any discussion in regards to approval of the July and August minutes? Hearing none, the motion passed to approve the July and August minutes. Thank you so much. All right. And we are going to start off with a presentation. Are our friends from Clark County Volunteer Lawyers Program present? Abby?
Yes,
Oh, I see that they're here. All right, wonderful. We're going to turn over to Elizabeth Fitzgerald, Jesse Anderson, and Amy Hernandez from the CCVLP to share some information about their program. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having us. I think Amy is starting us off. I see my name is on there. Do you have our slide deck or do we need to do a screen share?
Yes, I have it.
Okay.
Yeah, just let me know when you want to advance the slides.
Okay, perfect. Oh. Amy, can you hear us? We're a Zoom crew, so I think WebEx might be the thing. I can get us started, I guess. I see Amy's on here, but it looks like she's on mute, so I don't know if she's having trouble unmuting. We're here today. My name is Elizabeth Fitzgerald. With me are Amy Hernandez and Jesse Anderson, and we are the 3 co-directors of Clark County Volunteer Lawyers Program. Oh, Amy says she cannot unmute. So even in clicking the mute button in the bottom. Okay. Cool.
Abby, are you able to unmute Amy since you're the host?
I'm not. I can send her a request to unmute, but I can't unmute her. She should be able to just by clicking the unmute button, but I'm not sure if there's it's WebEx.
Yeah. Maybe try. My mic shows green. Weird. Okay. You want to try jumping out and back in again, Amy, if you haven't done that already. And I'll just keep going. All right. This is her chunk of the presentation, so I'm gonna need you to go to the next slide so I know what the plan was to talk about. Perfect. Okay. So we have a shared leadership at CCVLP. This extends to most of our programs as well, which are co-managed. And all of us adhere to community agreements, which are on the next slide. I'm not going to read them to you, but they are really central to our work. And you can read them later, I'm sure, when the slide deck comes out. And they just ensure that we work collaboratively and with curiosity and kindness to those that we work with. Next slide. Yes, those are our community agreements. And you can continue on to the next slide. So our mission, vision, all of this is right here. I'm not going to read this slide to you. We know most of the people in this call, but for those who are not familiar with us, we are a nonprofit organization that provides civil legal aid to those who are low income in Clark County. And civil issues are non-criminal, so they include things like evictions, domestic violence, family law, anything that you would not normally be able to get like a public defender for, and would be on your own if you can't afford an attorney. So we recognize that this is a glaring inequity, not just in the court system, but with ramifications throughout our community. So we work to make sure that we can restore power and voice to people who are most disproportionately marginalized by the court system. Next slide, please. Okay. Amy, do you want to try unmuting? Okay. She says she's unmuted. I think it may be a WebEx thing on your end, Amy. So I'm going to just keep going. Okay. But I've got my chat open so she can correct me if I get anything wrong. So Amy is specifically our housing director, which means that she oversees all of our housing services. And these are directed at tenants who are either facing fair housing concerns or discrimination in housing, as well as evictions. Next slide. Cool. So Housing Justice Project is where we started. And this was, I think, 2010, we began our Housing Justice Project. And we just had volunteer attorneys who would show up at the eviction docket, and they would jump in and try to give some advice and brief representation to people during their eviction hearing. And that rapidly, during the pandemic, we, like everybody else, faced a pretty wild shift in our services, and housing was quite the growth. It now is basically half of our organization, whereas it used to be maybe a third or a quarter. So with updates to the laws, there's now time for more notice in eviction proceedings. There's some more protections under landlord-tenant law. And so we have more ability to intervene earlier on with tenant protections. So in 2023, we hired our first full-time staff attorney to do what is pre-eviction or eviction prevention work. And so we have volunteer attorneys, but then our staff attorney, Sharon, provides full representation in all of these areas, which are eviction prevention, brief services, a lot of things to get out on the front end of this. A lot of this work is also habitability. So when landlords are not maintaining their homes, things like not repairing windows, or there's vermin, or the door doesn't work, And this, of course, disproportionately impacts the historically marginalized communities because there's a lot of fear of retaliation. There's concerns about speaking up to a landlord. And so our Housing Justice Project specifically works to be pretty culturally informed and making sure that they're addressing things the right way with the tenants that they're serving. Next slide. Yep, so we do advice clinics. And when we say clinics, that's an appointment with an attorney to give advice. It's a pretty quick scheduling process. Folks can call in, they can walk in, they can email in, they can get referred by a community partner. We're a member of the City of Vancouver's Homelessness Prevention Consortium. So all the organizations within that consortium have a warm referral form that they send to us, which can be for any legal issue that they believe are impacting somebody's housing stability. Next slide. And because of some, we're predominantly grant funded, which we didn't say up front, which is what drives a lot of our eligibility determinations. So Housing Justice Project, like many of our programs, goes by a federal poverty level of 200% for eligibility. And with that, we're still, I believe, usually about a month out for appointments. So it's pretty extensive demand. Sarah is our Sarah Gutschman is our Housing Justice Program Manager, and she both works out in the community to engage folks and also conducts all of our intakes. So her contact information is on here for folks. Next slide. Okay, cool. Right to Counsel. So Right to Counsel came about with I imagine everyone on this call at least heard of it or was familiar that this happened. Washington State is the first state in the nation to have representation, like appointed representation, so kind of like a public defender for low-income tenants in eviction proceedings. That's statewide. So in Clark County, we have the majority contract with the Office of Civil Legal Aid, which is a statewide entity. And so we grew this entire brand new unit during the pandemic to be able to accommodate this. And that now has a managing attorney who, in addition to Amy's co-director roles and overseeing all the housing things, she co-manages with Ben Moody, who's our housing programs managing attorney. So folks may have met Ben out in the community, and they co-manage this work. And then he oversees 4 staff attorneys they're all just doing eviction defense for folks who have been served with an eviction summons saying you're going to be evicted. And then there's 2 legal assistants in that program. So it's pretty significant for an organization that, 5 years ago we had no attorneys on staff. So that definitely pivoted. They do provide full representation for most folks as long as they qualify. Of course, people have to engage in it. And there are some nuances about how it's not exactly like public defense. If the funding goes away statewide, then you don't really have a right to counsel anymore. So it's really important to constantly advocate for continued funding for this service. Next slide, please. Okay. These are state set financial guidelines. So they are also 200% federal poverty level. They're a little more strict. A lot of our programs we really look for a lot of wiggle room and trying to make sure as many people can access our services as possible. But with this program, it's a pretty strict line. They can access us either by showing up at court, by being referred through the statewide hotline that exists, by walking in, by emailing in, by being referred by a community partner, by any way saying to anyone who knows us, I think I need help with an eviction. And our team works really hard to engage them directly. They also, our team gets a list of everybody who is, for anybody who's had an eviction filed, and they send out postcards to everybody's house saying, here's our information, please contact us. You might be eligible for free legal assistance for your eviction. All right. Next slide. Okay, I'm gonna let Jessie take over talking so you all don't have to just listen to my voice.
Okay, can you all hear me? Okay,
Yes.
happy to nod. Okay, so I'm going to talk about two things that are sort of related, but they are separate programs at CCVLP. So the first thing we're going to talk about is our family law programs. So you can go ahead and advance the slide. Okay, so in our family law program, we do not have a staff attorney for family law. Boy, do we need one, or 5, but we don't have one. And so this is a key area where our volunteers play a big role. All of our services in the family law clinic are provided with volunteer attorneys. The types of things that they're helping with are kind of the general things you think of when you hear the word family law, so divorce, separations, parenting plans, help with child support. We do end up helping with some protection order issues in that family law setting, just because our separate program that works specifically with domestic violence and sexual assault survivors, the capacity for that program is so huge that we can't serve it all, and so some do get help with our volunteers in family law. So in order to be in this family law program, there's a couple of requirements. We can't help folks if they're already working with an attorney. So if they have an attorney on record or an attorney that is helping them already, we can't help. And there is financial income qualifications for this program. They need to be 200% of the federal poverty limit, or 400% for minor guardianship cases. We do, and I'll talk about this on another slide, but we do look at this a little more closely if there are issues of domestic violence that go into that. Next slide, please. So in our family law program, there's several different ways that folks can get assistance. We have a courtroom readiness program, and that is with an attorney who is, I'm sorry, he's not an attorney, he's a volunteer. He does a lot of work helping folks prepare to present in court. He works with them about, what are their fears of being in court? How are some coping mechanisms that they can use when they're preparing and when they're at their day in front of the judge, so that they can present themselves in a way that the judge is going to best be able to hear what they need them to hear on that day. Then we also have our advice appointments. These are generally 30 to 60 minutes. They're about, the specific issue and the place at that day and time that the client is in their case. They can come back as many times as they want. They don't have to just learn everything about an entire divorce proceeding in 1 hour, but they're really focusing on that bite size. What do they need to know for their very next step? And then we have a court navigation program, which is run by volunteers also, and these are non-attorneys, but they're folks who are well acquainted with the courtroom and what it looks like and where to find different services at the courtroom. And they will actually go to the courthouse with clients and, walk with them and say, okay, this is where the clerk's office is. We can stand in line if you need to file something. They will take them to the interpreter services to sign up for an interpreter, translator in court. They can show them where court administration is so they can know where to turn in their copies of their pleadings. It's a really useful way for folks to feel supported when they're at court. And then our office offers a lot of administrative support to folks, so we can print documents. Generally people don't know how to look up court filings online, or they don't have the ability to do that. We can help anybody with that. We can pull documents that are already in their court record. We can print off forms and instruction packets for them, and help them with copying and the sort of things that people need if they might not have a printer at their house or that's accessible to them. Next slide. So the best way to access our family law program, this is one of our most in-demand programs throughout the community, is to leave a voicemail. on that specific extension 110. It is most helpful for us if they can leave their party names, the case number if they know it and have it, and any upcoming deadline or safety concerns. And then we also have Jessica and Cassia's email addresses there for you. There are two staff that work in this program. And then this graph here shows you know, how much greater the request for assistance and the demand in the community is versus what we are able to provide with appointments and volunteer attorneys. So it's quite overwhelming on a month-to-month basis how many phone calls and emails and requests, walk-ins, requests for assistance we get. And we're able to provide a lot of services, but this community and its needs just continue to grow. Next slide, please. Okay, so sort of related, but we're going to think about them very differently. This is our survivor support program. It's actually located in an entirely different suite in the same building. This program has a program manager, a managing attorney, 2 staff attorneys, and a legal assistant. So the level of service that we're able to provide to clients in this program is a bit more extensive than our family law program. Next slide. Okay, so the goals in our survivor support program are to return power and agency to survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault and their families. And some of the ways that we do this are helping people navigate the court system, helping them understand how to get their documents filed and how to seek the justice in the court system that we're really hoping they're able to get. A large part of this program is really working with folks on expectations and preparing for inevitable unfortunate outcomes when they do come. I'm sure all of us, especially parents, know that if we're going through something really tough, every parent is going to want their kids with them 100% of the time, and that is just not always the way things are going to work out. So that's a large part of this too, is managing client expectations for when they do have their day in court. We're working to help them keep themselves safe and their children safe. We're making an environment where they can share their experience and be heard. And we're working with the ultimate goal to establish secure and stable lives that are sustainable after they've separated or they've gotten a divorce or a protection order. Next slide. So in this program, we help, it says domestic violence here, but we also do sexual assault cases as well. So the biggest way we're helping is by helping folks get protection orders. And then we are also working with the associated custody or divorce cases if that is coming up to play in their specific instance. So the level of service really can be pretty broad. It could be a single advice appointment for somebody that really is able to do this on their own. They just need kind of that general first information and the right direction to go in. Or it could be ongoing assistance where we don't represent them in court, but we help them with their paperwork along the way and read over their declarations, make sure everything's looking good, and answer questions they have. Or it could be full representation in court. Next slide. So we wish that we could provide full representation to every single person that needs it. Fortunately, we're just not able to do that. And so we do have to come up with a way to determine which clients in which cases do receive full representation. Next slide, please. So our program manager and our managing attorney have
Sorry, I'm having technical issues in the room. I will be back in a second.
Okay. That's okay. I can talk about our rubric without the slide. So when we're trying to determine what clients get full representation, we're really looking to serve folks who have the highest barriers with the least ability to go forth on their own. So we're looking at, is there a language or a cultural barrier that's going to make it more difficult for them in court? Is there a disability issue that's going to make it more difficult in court? What is the severity of the abuse? How recent or current is the abuse? Are there additional resources in the community? Is this person going to be able to get assistance from another provider? Is another provider better suited to provide assistance for them? So we've got a nice rubric to help us lay out, because it's not a fun thing to be the people deciding which client gets turned away and which client you serve. So we do have to have some clear pathway to help us make that decision. Let me just pull up the slides on my own here.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I'll get it back
That's
up in
okay.
just a second.
Yeah, I'm nearly there. Okay. And then it is really useful to know that in our survivor support program, we don't have the same income requirements. Oftentimes survivors have limited access to finances, and so it really doesn't make much difference if they, as a family, financially could afford to hire an attorney. If they don't have access to those finances, then that does nothing for them. And so we do take that into consideration when determining whether whether their income might be over the limit in a different program. So we really focus on the survivor support program on providing trauma-informed care, and that means, we've been very intentional about what our offices look like, what they feel like, how they're spoken to by everybody in the office that they're going to come into contact with. We work really hard to minimize re-traumatization of clients. We work hard to make sure that they don't have to tell their story a whole bunch of times to a whole bunch of different screeners. And if there's a situation where they're going to have to discuss really personal things in court, we really try to work with the court to get a special set so that they can maybe do that in a courtroom with fewer people in it rather than on the public docket. We also we work really hard with language access in all of our programs. In Survivor Support Program, we have a bilingual staff member who's able to provide advice and assistance in Spanish and in English, and that's really useful. We also focus a lot on language access with all our printed documents, making sure that forms and anything that a client might need to read can be translated into their language. And then we work to maintain relationships with a lot of supportive networks. We work collaboratively with the YWCA and Lutheran Community Services, Northwest Justice Project, and other local agencies to help provide services for survivors of domestic abuse and sexual assault. So on our slides, when they're sent to you after yep, there we go. The email address for our program manager and our legal assistant for the survivor support program are found there. The best way to get in contact if you have somebody that you'd like to refer would be to those email addresses. And as always, it's really useful for us if we can get the potential client's names so that we can conflict check everything before we're able to talk to anybody. And I think Elizabeth is going to talk to us about special programs.
Yes, I can jump in to finish us up. Yeah, thank you. Okay, I was going to make sure we were good on slides. So special programs is honestly just the internal word that we use to describe everything that does not fit into the other buckets, making them oh so special. The next slide, you can go to the next slide, Abby. So these are the categories of the different areas of law that we would call special programs. So the first is lay guardianship. This is something that is for adults who require guardianship. So not to be confused with minor guardianship, which is like custody. And lay guardianship is where somebody who is not a professional needs to become a guardian of somebody else. So often it is a parent of a disabled child who turns 18. It might be a spouse of somebody who has dementia. There's a variety of reasons that lay guardianship would apply. Becoming a lay guardian, though difficult, is manageable without an attorney. Once you are a guardian, you then are required to do this extensive, complicated reporting to the court at regular intervals. And that is very difficult, which means a lot of guardians fall out of compliance. And then the court gets upset and there's no enforcement. And, you know, sometimes it's just an elderly couple and one of them is really great at taking care of the other one, but maybe not so great at financial accounting. So we have volunteer attorneys who come in and they help with the reporting that goes along with that. They basically do all of it with them. So they sit down, and these are much longer visits. They're just dedicated to that client and making sure that they're getting the reporting done to be compliant with the court. And then the client knows how to file that with the court. And all of these are volunteer attorneys. So we have no staff attorneys doing any of this work. Immigration is the next one. We do provide advice on anything that's not urgent. Unfortunately, that's just because we only have so many appointments. And these attorneys are not usually doing representation. And so things like, hey, if I do this one thing, will that impact my immigration status? Or I want my parents or my partner to change their own immigration status, or what do I do to change mine? Those are the types of questions that we're helping with. If folks are in deportation defense status, these really urgent and crucial needs, those are not things that we can help with, though we will provide as many resources as possible. Bankruptcy as well as debt defense are huge needs. They're currently closed not because we don't have the volunteer attorneys, but because we simply don't have the staff capacity to administer these. It's a really heavy lift to make sure that clients feel supported and our case managed appropriately, and all those things that Jesse talked about with family law, of navigating them with their paperwork and copies and getting their appointments. That's just a big administrative lift. So because we can't burn our staff out any more than we already are, we're closed for bankruptcy. We're also closed for elder law and wills and estate planning. General law is slowly reopening, which is great, because this is the thing that's just like all those weird contracts, or oops, I agreed to, you know, sign a contract for a vacuum cleaner and then I didn't. Now I'm being, you know, it's financial abuse of elders, lemon law for cars, just lots of really messy stuff, consumer protection things. So that is slowly reopening, which is great. All of these, they're just advice only, so people can engage with us in all the ways that we hope people engage with us, get scheduled for an appointment. And then for all of these, as with all of our programs, they can return as many times as they need. So it's never just one appointment. It is keep coming back. You just might not always see the same volunteer attorney. Next slide.
I just want to do a quick time check. We have just a
Yes.
few more minutes.
Got it.
Thank you.
Cool. I will brush over the last chunk. We do have community court in here. I know Jamie's on this call too. You can just jump to that, and I'll note that it's in the slide deck for folks to look at later. So community court, which I imagine CAAB has heard of and probably gotten reports on at some point, is a diversion program for people with crimes that are normally associated with living outside. Next slide, please. We provide the staff person who is the coordinator, non-attorney coordinator. So it's very heavily court staff and lawyers and judges. And we have a non-attorney person in there who is not only in charge of overseeing all, you know, the data and that work, but trying to provide an equity lens to what's going on in that court. All right, I think that is it. There's some slides on what we have coming up, but you can all read that. We do have Battle of the Bands, which is our annual fundraiser on October 3rd, so we encourage everybody to come to that. I know we're like at time, including questions, but happy to take any if there are some pressing ones.
And can you share your slideshow out with us to Abby so she can share it with us?
Yeah, I mean, this is Abby who's driving this.
Oh, okay.
Abby should,
Perfect.
Yes.
I have it and I'll send it out to you all with the meeting follow-up. And I
Thank
also
you
see
so
that
much.
David maybe raised his hand.
I'm sorry, what?
I saw David's hand go up. David, did you have a question?
Yeah, can you hear my voice okay?
Yes, thanks, David.
Okay, this is David. I represent the deaf community, and some people are deaf-blind also. So while some deaf people, if they need to contact you, possibly they could call VP or maybe VRI, you can communicate with them, if not face-to-face. But for the first call to ask questions about screening, deaf-blind people have limited hours with a pro-tactile interpreter. So I'm curious if a deaf blind person need housing assistance questions answered, or if they needed support for domestic violence escape. How would your process work as a volunteer program for deaf blind people to make that first phone call to ask you questions for screening? And then later, if you accept them as a client, would you be able to afford to provide interpreters for them for meetings face to face?
Yes, so we absolutely arrange interpretation, including relay or live interpretation, any form of requested interpretation. That is something that we arrange. If somebody walks in or contacts us, obviously we're going to try to get them on the phone or video if possible. We do schedule things at all hours. So we have appointments that are in the evening or that are on the weekends sometimes, to make sure that it's accessible both for the client as well as the volunteer attorneys.
So follow-up question related to that. So suppose a person is deaf-blind and they needed to call you, but they couldn't call you because they don't have available a person that can voice for them. Can they email you first, or can they knock on a door to ask questions if they have a person with them? How's the best way for a deaf-blind person to contact you if they cannot call you?
Absolutely. Anybody can email us. We have a general email address, which is info@ccvlp.org. If they email that, it'll get directed to the right program. They can also walk in. Our walk-in hours are currently Monday through Wednesday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. We realize those are pretty limited, but it is just really dependent on our staff capacity. And so that's what they can do right now. If they email us and need to show up at a time that is outside of office hours, our staff are really accommodating and we'll meet up with them outside of those hours.
Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much. Sorry, apologies for the tech issues. That's always a huge challenge, but the information was really helpful, and I look forward to sharing out your slideshow with anyone who may be interested in learning more. So thank you.
Thanks all.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Abby. She's going to provide us with outcomes report from July 2023 to July 2024.
Thank you, Melanie. And if anyone else has any follow-up questions for Elizabeth, feel free to send them to me and I'll pass them along. Thank you, Elizabeth and Amy and everyone else for being here and for your great presentation. All right, so here is the outcomes report for fiscal year 2023. So July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. And I sent this all out over email. I also have some hard copies in the room. If anyone still needs a copy, please feel free to reach out. I'll also include it in the follow-up notes. Most of you have, there we go. Most of you have seen this report a lot of times, but for those who haven't, each Community Action Program and Homeless Crisis Response Program and the annual report period we have here in orange. And then if you scroll over, this green section shows some of the outcomes and outputs that each program reports on quarterly, their annual proposed goals, so the number of individuals or households that they intend to serve, the number that they have achieved to date, so that is the number they've achieved for the entire fiscal year, and the percent achieved here. So right now, most of the programs will be around 100%. The goal is to fall between 80% and 120% range for those that have significantly overachieved or underachieved on certain goals. We have received explanations, so if anyone's curious about a specific indicator, I can pull those explanations and let you know. And then we're also following up with each program to kind of reassess these goals as needed and where needed. And then in blue, we have the annual contract amount, the total spent to date, their current balance. Most of them are zero, except for some extenuating circumstances, which I could go into detail about if people are curious. And then the percent spent, which again will be around 100% for all programs. All right, so at the top here, we have our community action programs. Like I said, most of them are around 100% achieved and 100% spent. You'll notice that Clark College has some lower numbers, and that's because this program ended earlier than expected on January 5th, and all remaining funds were allocated to other CSBG programs. You'll also see that under Lord's Gym food assistance, they only serve 23% of the number of youth they assessed for food insecurity than they expected. And this was due to changes in leadership and unexpected challenges in practice. So, like I said, work with this agency to reassess that goal as needed. So something to know about these community action programs. All of the community action program contracts, except for our college, have been renewed for another year at the same amount until June 30th, 2025. And then we'll have our next round of requests for applications this fall. That funding will run from July 2025 through June 2027 with an option to renew for another year. And once we receive all those applications, they will come to you all for review and scoring as usual. And we'll have an in-depth training about that. And moving down to homelessness response programs, these are organized by program category, the same way they've done in the past. You'll see that we have system coordination and data collection, court support services, outreach services, shelter services, rent assistance is prevention, transitional housing, rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing. And similarly, as the community action programs, you'll notice that most of these around 100% of their achieved goals. But some are higher or lower, and we're assessing those as needed. For example, you'll see under the Council for the Homeless Crisis or Housing Solutions Center program, which I believe was at the top. Yes, here. So you'll see that this program, they were able to assess many more households than anticipated. So you'll see that their percent achieved on this top goal was 263%. This is great, though, it doesn't necessarily meet the anticipated target. So we're working with them to reassess those numbers for next year. And then some things to note about these programs. So first of all, the Share Homeless Outreach Program is still billing to other grants, like I mentioned last time, which is why you'll not see any spending under this contract. Second, any remaining state and local funds were recaptured and used for the house deficit that I've mentioned before. And any remaining EPROP or eviction prevention and rent assistance programs were rolled over to the next fiscal year. That's because these programs took a while to get up and running, and you'll notice that most programs labeled eviction prevention rent assistance were pretty underspent, so all those funds have been rolled over the next year. And then again, all targets are being reevaluated as needed. All right, and then this last page shows information which is pulled from program reports and HMIS. So on the top left here, you'll see participant satisfaction survey data. During fiscal year 2024, programs sent out 6,171 surveys to individuals and households and received 1,318 responses for a 21.4% response rate. And of these responses, 89.4% indicated a positive overall experience, which is great. Next, we have community engagement, which shows the number of volunteers and volunteer hours who help operate these programs. This year, we have had a total of 2,363 volunteers with 29,855 volunteer hours, 6,814 of which were by low-income volunteers, for a total value of $1,171,483 in volunteer time. And I also mentioned this last time, but a recent report by Independent Sector at University of Maryland calculated that the current value of a volunteer hour in Washington State is $40.28, which is why this volunteer hour value has significantly increased. And this is the rate that's being used by CAAB, and so it's what we use to calculate volunteer hour value. Then the next chart shows the number of grievances that have been received and resolved by our programs. So out of the 48 programs which report grievance information, so 48 programs which report grievance information, 33% have received a grievance, and there were 115 total grievances received, and 82 of those have been resolved. The rest are in the process of being resolved, and staff will keep an eye on those to make sure that resolution is processed. And we're, again, not concerned about the number of grievances. It's really common for participants to be unhappy with parts of the assistance they receive and answers to certain questions, but we do keep an eye on the number of grievances and the reasons for those received by each agency, and we know any red flags. And then down at the bottom, we have an overview. Oh, Diana, I see that your hand is raised.
Yes, hi, Abby. I wasn't sure if you wanted to take questions at the end of your presentation or is now a good time?
I'm happy to answer questions now.
Okay. Two things. One, on those grievances, any sense of what types of grievances are? I mean, some of them could fall into potential not following the law, if you will. So I just want to know if there's an awareness of the types of grievances that are coming in. I understand that they may not be happy with service, but maybe there's something like, hey, they said there was going to be a translator, but there wasn't, or nobody understands me, or whatever, you know, just to really get a good sense for that. And then the second part had to do with the volunteers. And I noticed some of the projects that were being trained, and I bring this up because of the recent after action review that the ECHO group did on the severe weather incident that happened and how we would move forward. So the question came up on, are any of these organizations, or is the volunteer training piece here tied to severe weather? Or is there anything here that is tied to
severe weather response or training? And if not, can we add that as an element for future funding?
Yeah, so to answer your first question about the grievances, we do have each program report on the grievances that they've received. And if there are any legal concerns or violations of contract, we definitely flag that and follow up as needed. Usually the grievances are more about, I was denied a service because I wasn't eligible, or I had a disagreement with a staff member. And in that case, we let agencies resolve those as needed. So in this last fiscal year, I haven't seen any concerning grievances, but I would, flag those and report them as needed. And then as to your question about severe weather, so we do have a contract with Council for the Homeless, or we have a number of contracts with Council for the Homeless, and they manage the severe weather shelters. The volunteers are reported by each of the individual programs, and we don't get data specifically on, what those volunteers are doing and what they're trained on. I would hope that the volunteers who are working with the Council for the Homeless Severe Weather Shelters are trained on how to operate severe weather shelters, but that's not something that we directly monitor. If you are curious about that, I could reach out to the programs and get more information. Pull up some of the council.
Yeah, I think it's worth having a conversation to get a better understanding of this issue around training a volunteer base to respond to severe weather, because I think that is a niche that is missing here. I see the training there, but maybe it's just too generic at this point to parse it out. But we do have an issue of the volunteer base when it comes around severe weather response, and even to some extent emergency response. But I think it's worth having that conversation, in terms of funding. Are we adequately funding the training component to really capture the needs based on what we are seeing evolve in the landscape out there? So I think it's time to, I would suggest having that check-in. And perhaps consider, I don't know if it's in the homeless action plan or, something to really incorporate our ability to respond to severe weather appropriately, because we did not do a very good job this last time, and it's not going to get any better.
Yeah, for sure. So as you know, for all community action programs, funding is based on the needs identified in the community needs assessment, and then programs are determined based on, the applications that we receive for programs. And any housing related programs, that's through the homeless crisis response system, which is managed by Kayla and Luis. They are currently working on the RFA for this next round, and I'm not sure if they're including specific details about severe weather in that, but I can reach out to them and see what the indication is there. But that is a good thing to flag.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd be happy to share that. From the ECHO, Councilor Sue Marshall and I have been approaching this. And so that was one question that will come up at the ECHO meeting. It's like, are we appropriately addressing this within CAAB, funding, and not just CAAB, but all other elements tied to the structure that we have. Anybody want to chime in on this? Jamie, did you want to add anything?
Sure. Yeah, I did have my hand up. Maybe to shed a little bit more light on this, there are two components of this that are being discussed at ECHO. One, because Council for the Homeless has expressed that their planning of severe weather shelter is funded through their community planning or their system planning funding that they receive through CAAB dollars. And they've noted that all the additional severe weather planning needs are not expressly, like separately included in their funding. And it takes significantly more resources than historically it's taken, just given the changes in climate. And so there was discussion yesterday about whether or not severe weather planning, as well as severe weather response in outreach and shelter, et cetera, could be included in RFPs so that contractors would be specifically planning for those events. So that was one piece. And then the second piece on the training is that because Counts for the Homeless, most of the severe weather shelters that they have partnered with are churches and largely volunteer based. They can't necessarily require these volunteers to participate in any particular training or training at all because they're not fun. Counts for the Homeless isn't funding them to operate shelter. These are just volunteers. So then because of that, we have seen some challenges at severe weather shelters, just regarding kind of probably many things, but particularly the intensity of symptoms, behaviors, challenges, barriers that we're seeing in severe weather shelters, and volunteers expressing that they need a little bit more support, whether that's with trained staff or just more training themselves. But there's not really any funding to support that, or not enough funding to support that, which again goes back to the RFP thing. So.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I will check in with Kayla and Louise to see what their plans are for this upcoming RFA. It is important to note that we are, constrained by the intention of this funding and the grants that we receive from the state and federal government. But I will check in with them and see what the current status is in the RFA. Amy, did you have your hand up?
I just think where you guys got the information for the community engagement before you came, and you said Washington was going back. I don't know.
Yeah, so that was a report by the independent sector at the University of Maryland, which is kind of the standard data for volunteer hour values in certain states, and that report came out in early 2024. It's the report that CAAB uses. We received those numbers from CAAB.
Just to meet with but their offset equity is doing right now it's $45 an hour, and this month in September they're rolling out the new guidelines and it'd be $56 an hour. I wouldn't say anything, but that's like a $60 difference for sure.
Yeah, if they're rolling out a new report, that will definitely use those numbers when the new report is released.
Well, you guys were going up.
So it's the University of Maryland conducts a national report. They assess each state individually, and then CAAB and other state entities use those values in their reporting. Yeah. Any other questions? Or should I talk about these demographic charts real quick? Oh, Ernie, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, under the race responses that you had, and you had a multiple races, others, I assume that would include the Latino group. Is that where they were? Mexican, Latino?
So these race demographics are pulled from HMIS, and these are the data categories that are available in the HMIS system. So we do report on ethnicity as well, which is where Hispanic and Latino would fall. So I don't have that chart on this slide. I can definitely include ethnicity data on the next report if you're interested in seeing that. But under other would be any race that isn't listed in these 5 categories here.
Okay. And
Yeah. I
the,
agree with Ernie on that. Abby, we definitely need to include the ethnicity and make that a usual criteria here in the demographics. And if there's a way to change the HMIS to include that, I think that's better representation of our community.
For sure. I will see what data I can pull from HMIS and be sure to include that in the next report.
I also want to do a quick time check. We have task force updates, which I assume can be fairly brief, and then we can also push the January meeting discussion to our next meeting if that's okay, so that you can finish your report and then we can do a quick task force update.
This is David Poland. I've had my hand up a long time.
Sorry, David, didn't see your hand up. Your question?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say I agree with Diana and Jamie. I'm very glad to hear that they have some kind of a agency or group that they're involved in working on emergency preparedness, because way before COVID, the deaf community, Chinese people, and people of many different languages were asked by CRESA 911 in Clark County and also in Portland for emergency disaster preparedness to discuss linguistic cultural minorities issues when they have a disaster going to a shelter, and they learned a lot. So it might be a good idea also contact CRESA to talk with them, and also just contact the deaf community and all these other linguistic communities if you have questions. And it sounds like that group asked at least some people about that because they got good feedback. It is correct that if they're homeless and there's a natural disaster that happens and they need to be contacted and where to go and how to protect them and what shelter they go to and is there a bunker or something, but also people just in general, what do we do? There's nothing really clear. Like I had contacted the Department of Health for Washington State and told them they had to update their website page for the deaf because it was for emergency preparedness and it had not been updated since about 1990. So recently they updated it. It's not perfect, but they've not provided an ASL. So information contacting people in their language is very important, or we're neglecting the people that need assistance maybe the most. Now, what I want to talk about, since they answered my question for me, or they asked the questions for me, is up above top left corner, if I could see that, please. When you show about satisfaction, that number there, thank you so much. There's more than one way to look at this. Now, you're correct. You can look at that of the 21.4% respondents, that the majority clearly had positive, for the most part, of satisfaction. Some did not. But we cannot assume that that means that all people are being represented by that number or that statistic, because we have about 80% of people that did not respond. And there's many reasons why people do not respond. Maybe it's like boring for them, or it's not accessible for them to respond, or they're scared to respond. They're not sure if they could lose their home. Because of cultural reasons, some people cannot complain. There's many reasons why people would not respond to a survey of satisfaction. So we cannot assume there's not any abuse or neglect or problems, serious ones, because that satisfaction survey is such a small number. That's why I just want to show the perspective to everyone here. Thank you.
Thank you, David. One thing I just want to point out real quick is that Clark County Community Services is not involved in emergency preparedness or emergency response at all. The only way in which we interface with that sector is through the Council for the Homeless Severe Weather Shelters, which are funded through the Homeless Crisis Response System shelter specific funding. So any emergency preparedness communications or response, that all goes through CRESA. Or a few departments in public health. So this board and the Department of Community Services isn't associated with that, just in the severe weather shelters that are related to funding. And
they're not connected, you're right, but I was just saying, if you wanted to contact CRESA, possibly they would have some of that information that could be useful to you, of what people had responded in general, all these different cultures and languages. It might be useful.
Thank you, David. All right, so we are running short on time and need to move forward. So you guys have all seen these demographic charts before. You all have the report, so I'll let you look at these and feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. Thank you, Ernie and Diana, for asking the question about ethnicity charts, and I will see what I can pull from HMIS to include on the next report. All right, back to you, Melanie.
All right, thank you. We have some task force updates, and these are probably pretty brief. Amy, do you want to give us a legislative advocacy task force update, please?
Yeah. Okay.
Don't forget to speak up. It's nice over here.
Right. Trying to find that. Was that CAAB is doing, well, that would be, well, actually, are we supposed to be voting on this time? Or what? I don't,
Just whatever update you want to provide.
well, there's 3 of them, actually it's called in Washington. There's 3 of those. It's in, I think it's this, they're one of those. Climate Commitment Act, capital gains. Climate Commitment Act, which is -2117. And the other one is capital gains -2109. And I don't know if you're doing this one, but I-2124 is dismantle Washington Care long-term care. That's basically right now with it. I'm all that's not even a sentence. Go. For anything, so I don't. That's where. Yep.
Thanks, Amy. So just to elaborate on that a little bit, WASCAP and a few other organizations are doing some advocacy regarding a few bills that are going to be on the upcoming ballot. One is a measure to repeal the capital gains tax, and also there's a measure to repeal the Climate Commitment Act, which would also have significant impacts on Washington's, climate progress and would impact the energy assistance funding that we receive. So WASCAP is advocating for no votes on both of those measures. And the Legislative Advocacy Task Force was discussing whether we want to, follow WASCAP's lead on those and do any advocacy of
Next meeting. One slide be closer to the session.
All right, thanks, Amy. Yeah, we will report more on that next meeting. For the community needs assessment, the English version has been published on the website. I'm still waiting for translations to be formatted before sending out the news release and distributing the report to partners. But if any of you want to view or share the English version of the community needs assessment, it is on our website. And for the policy task force, we have the policy task force has come up with a draft for a code of conduct for the CAAB, as well as a few minor revisions to the bylaws. I sent those out to you all for review, and we will be discussing those and voting to approve them shortly after a couple more agenda items. And I believe those are all the task force updates. To you, Melanie.
Great, thank you so much. The next order of business is hearing from Samantha Whitley from the City of Vancouver about the affordable housing and homelessness update. Samantha, over to you.
Hi, thank you. Good morning, everybody. We have a new housing committee that just launched last month. So we held our first meeting. There's about 20 people who are community volunteers from a wide spectrum of housing backgrounds. And so they'll be scoring our CDBG and home applications, as well as our Affordable Housing Fund applications. The CDBG and home applications will open October 1st for pre-applications. We're on the same timeline and schedule as the county for their applications. And we also have switched over to Neighborly software to accept online applications, which is the same system that the county uses too. So we're expecting about 700,000 available in home funds for rental assistance or affordable housing construction. And we're expecting about the same amount that we received last year in CDBG, which is about 1.3 million. However, we're in a little bit of a crunch with our CDBG funds because we now are paying annually $340,000 for our Section 108 loan that was used to purchase Fourth Plain Commons. So that'll be a 20-year payment that we make each year that will come out of our entitlement funds, and we won't be able to allocate those out to our partners in the community. Our program year for CDBG and home is also the same as the county. So July 1st through June 30th. And so we just published our CAPR, which is the Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report. That describes all of the outcomes and the funding that was spent for CDBG and home over the last 12 months ending in June. And we will have a public hearing at City Council for that on September 16th. And the report itself is available on our website. Maybe some of your members have received an email if you're on our mailing list. And then one other update on the Affordable Housing Fund, we're planning to accept applications on a rolling basis next year, starting next year in the spring. And that way we won't have a huge bunch of applicants that are waiting for us to open the funding. We'll be able to be a little bit more streamlined as far as providing funding to projects when it's needed, because we kept trying to align with the state funding round. The state wants to see that local commitment has been made. And so there was a little bit of a hang up with projects as they were waiting for us to commit our funding so they could show the state that they had local commitment. And so we hope that this helps that out a little bit better. I think those are all my updates, unless there's any questions. Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for being here. All right, so our next order of business is some follow-up about the equity training. A group of us met in August with Ma Caroline and had really great discussion, conversation, opportunity for connection with one another. And then following that, there have been some questions about the expectations for attendance. And so the executive committee and I met, and we wanted to just re-clarify our expectations for the trainings that are coming up, and just talk about, and we also discussed just how important they were in regards to the opportunity for board development, also connecting with one another. You know, we've talked about how do we build connection and community amongst this group in our work, because a lot of it is very business heavy and just getting through the meeting agendas, which are pretty, you know, stacked. And so this is a great time to come together and just have some of those opportunities for connection. And so one of the things that we decided and discussed about based on feedback was the trainings will not be required. We know when you signed up for this role with CAAB, the meeting expectation was every other month for our meetings. And then obviously we tend to meet longer in January for some more heavy work. But part of that agreement was never monthly meetings, which are now part of that structure because of the every other month equity training. And so we want to have the same expectations for the equity training as for our monthly CAAB meetings, is that if, you know, we want you to attend, it's really important. The work that we're going to be doing in our equity training really aligns with the CAAB's commitment to equity, which is part of our bylaws. And so we want to have that board commitment to equity. And this is just one piece of it. And so if you are unable to attend, we ask and expect that you notify Abby in advance. We understand life comes up the morning of, you're not feeling well, you have to take care of a sick family member or something. Obviously it could be last minute, but we do ask if you know in advance you have a conflict with your schedule, that we ask that you notify Abby. There's also some logistics involved with the training in terms of space, materials. Ma Caroline brought lovely snacks, and so it's really helpful for us to know in advance who is attending and how many to expect. We Yeah, so I just want to put that out there. Again, there was some follow-up questions about equity training attendance, and so we want you to treat this as you would a CAB meeting, in that you make it a priority to attend, but if you're not able to notify Abby in advance. Like to open it up for discussion or feedback or thoughts.
So just to clarify, Melanie, and I know that as an executive committee, we had a really robust discussion about the requirements of a mandatory training. And I do want to just express that the leaning was to make it mandatory because of the importance in alignment with the county's community service strategic plan and the fact that it is a component and an important element in our bylaws, and that not wanting to attend wasn't considered, in our view, an excused absence, that it would be more along the line of unexpected illness or family emergency. And so, you know, prioritizing this as a part of our standardized expectations of board members is important. So I do think, you know, it should be a point of discussion for the full board, and this is that opportunity for people to voice how they feel about additional trainings that are required or asked of us. So I do appreciate you taking the lead on this, Melanie, and I think it's probably something that other boards struggle with. You know, what do you make mandatory? What do you not make mandatory? What are the repercussions or, you know, the negative impacts of not participating when you've committed to a board and you know, the values and goals that are set forth for us all as, you know, volunteer members to try to make our community better. So I do hope that people on the CAAB board have this discussion right now so we can make sure that everybody is heard.
I see Ernie's hand went up.
Yeah, I've been to some of these trainings before. The question that I have is, how is the equity training impacting us as board members? How do what we do have an impact on this? I don't quite follow what we need to do in regards to the equity training, in regards to the decisions we have to make. But that's, you know, just an overview after hearing the training and going through some of it, that you know, what is the purpose of having to do that with what we do? I don't see us really being that involved in the equity training purposes, but that's just my outlook on the board. I think from what I've seen of the board, we're pretty much spread out in this field. But I don't know if that's an answerable question or not.
Brittany's hand go up.
Yeah, thank you. I was able to attend the equity training and really appreciated the kind of introduction that was provided. I think that what I was going to say might apply to what Ernie just was sharing, in that while we all do represent a very wide variety of backgrounds and experiences, and I think that is the beauty of this board, that the equity training is really providing a foundation for all of us to get on the same page as we're looking at the community needs assessment, as we're looking at the opportunities of funding agencies in the community, because we only have what we have learned. And the equity training allows us to have some shared agreements, to have some common knowledge, and I think is a good way for us to continually learn and invest in diversity of our community and the people that we're trying to support.
Thank you, Brittany. David, you have your hand up?
David or Diana? Sorry, I wasn't sure who you're calling.
Oh, I thought I saw David, but Diana, I see your hand up.
So you don't want me to talk now?
Well, no,
No,
I did.
that's what-
I saw your hand went away. I wasn't sure. Okay, David,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I put my hand down because I don't want to keep it up while I'm talking. Doesn't mean I quit talking. I emailed privately all of the board my concerns. So you know. So I feel right now, if I'm being told we're not required, but before we're told we're required by the executive board. And now I'm also told by the executive board that it is required if you don't want to go. Even if you know my reasons why I don't want to go. And I have good reasons for that. And I have stated my reasons. I feel like that is really a way to force me to come out and publicly talk about the issue. And that's not really fair to me, is it? No. I feel it's oppression. I feel that's discrimination. Now, I'm going to tell you one thing and one thing only. My observations, having majored in social work at Gallaudet University with professors, both deaf and hearing, that were Black, by the way, and female, most of them, is that when we were studying about the different kinds of groups and cultures that we needed to learn about in order to be culturally competent to serve people, and to know when we're not culturally competent and we need to refer a person, is that the best way for me to learn is by one-on-one meeting with individuals that I'm working with as peers and getting to know each other. Not a class, not a book, not PowerPoint slides, because you cannot force people to change. You cannot educate, and change them. But some of the things maybe you're having the meeting as a group of talking about things and learning, maybe will work, but better is if the individual decides they want to learn about each individual they're together with in the community, to not be scared of people that are different from them, to go up and say, I want to actively pursue getting to know this group of people, or this individual I work with. I want to know them personally. That prevents people from becoming scared, creating laws that hurt them, and punishing them and discriminating against them. That's my observation, having studied social work and living in Clark County all my life, and also being in DC and seeing the discrimination in the South. It's not the same. Different states and different countries have all their different oppressions and their different cultures and their different perceptions, and it influences when they move to Clark County, how they behave and what they assume about us. Not all individuals are the same. And if you meet one person who represents one group, they're not the same. If you meet another deaf person, they're not going to be the same as me. They're not going to agree with me on everything. And the same thing for all individuals. We're all different. That's what diversity is. We're never going to be perfect people. And we should not feel guilty for that. I would not blame you as a hearing person to be ignorant about some things that impact the deaf community if you've never had the opportunity to talk with me. But you have the opportunity to talk with me, but does not need to be in a classroom. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Diana, I see your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. I know we're running out of time, so I'll keep this short. Two things. One, when this was first brought up, it's like, you know, we're all in a different place with our understanding of what equity means. And number two is the point about how we apply this knowledge and information growth that we will gain from this to our role as CAB members, but also to our individual self outside of this. So there's a benefit to this, not just as CAB members, but as an individual learning and growing about equity, because equity is a unifying factor. It is not a program. It is not a class. It is not, I mean, it is literally I just want to say a muscle, brain, different way of thinking, and to some extent, a different level of consciousness, if you will. So anyway, I just want to put a plug in for the training, and Abby, or talking with Ma Carolyn to make sure that things like what criteria are we using as CAB members to look at what we're being funded. So applying an equity lens to that. Right now, can you tell me what equity elements we have in the CAB? Can somebody tell me that? So I think that's the part about how we're able to say, this is how CAB is equitable. And then boom, we lay it out. Here's our criteria, here's our thought process, and here's the challenges and gaps where we know we need to improve because we're striving to make everything equitable. So I just want to reiterate that, one, we'll learn from each other because we're each in a different place when it comes to equity and our understanding of it. And two, applying this, what we learned, to our systems and processes within CAB so that we're truly meeting what the mission is to be equitable in all that we do. It's a journey. So I just want to put my plug in.
Great, thank you. And Ernie and Karen, Ernie, do you have your hand up just from the first comment, or did you have something else to say?
No, I just left it up. I just
Okay.
wanted to say, the equity training, I think is very good, but I just don't really see how it fits in our particular group because we're all different backgrounds. We have men, women, different ethnic backgrounds already on the board, already doing these things, but I know we have to move on, so that's it.
Okay, thank you. Karen?
Yeah, hi. I really appreciate these conversations, but I think this is exactly the reason why I endorse this training, is because I really believe that attending these meetings is not always the place to have the discussions that go in depth. And so having the opportunity to have space to delve more in on a deeper level is really important. I think that equity is a lifelong learning experience. And I mean, I think that even as myself, I'm working on a doctorate degree in social work and using a framework on DEI with some additions, and I always have more to learn. So I think that anytime there's opportunities that, well, for one, you don't have to pay out of pocket to attend, we should all be attending just as human beings on the planet living together, and having a really good understanding of how much history impacts programs around housing today, and understanding all the different perspectives. And I think that when Diana was talking about the lens, I would highly recommend using a framework that we could utilize, which is it's a DPAR, so it's like a diversity, equity, inclusion, but it also adds the intersectionality, power analysis, and anti-racism, to be able to look at the policies. And I think to that same point, that what I noticed earlier when Diana was speaking about oh gosh, the weather condition, I can't recall the exact words, but basically what I experienced in that conversation was exactly why I do think that we all need to continue to have equity trainings and discussions and having opportunities, is because then you can have those really brief and high level discussions on the work that we are doing in CAAB, and being able to address, like, well, who's not at the table making these decisions, who is making these decisions? Are all these different things being addressed when looking at policies? Even the CAAB bylaws, I like that they align with what the county is doing with the equity, and understanding that, Melanie, when you said that it's not required, I would even go as far to say is that maybe that is something that is introduced as like an amendment, is that those trainings should become required. And to David's point about being forced, I mean, as somebody from a marginalized community, I think that I don't always want to talk about how those issues impact myself or the community that I am a part of, but it's important for me to hear from other people's perspectives on different things. But I don't think that the CAAB meetings specifically are the place to have those conversations. So creating opportunities with somebody such as Ma Caroline to delve into them on a deeper level is really key for us, so that we don't forget the importance of equity. So I was not able to go to the last one, but all the rest of them are on my calendar. So I really look forward to attending those in the future. So thank you for this opportunity to be able to speak on that.
This is David. I want to follow up on what Karen said since she mentioned my name. I appreciate everyone's perspective. We all have a right to have a different perspective, to agree and disagree. And again, I told you in email private reasons why I don't want to go to this particular DEI training, and I have good reasons for that. And I shouldn't have to disclose. My interpreter's change in 1 second, please. Something she said, and I don't want to fall on my head right now. She was talking about the importance of having this as a separate group, and really it's kind of more private, off camera, and not taking the time of CAAB. But the CAAB itself, that is set up, required for us to do, and it's open to the public to see. It's on YouTube. It's for people to know what we're talking about. And I feel that's the best opportunity for us who are oppressed, marginalized groups to express to people with power, people elected here representing, because I'm not elected, okay? I'm one of the people. I have no power. Most of you have power. I do not. But it's my opportunity to show all of you publicly that I'm talking for the deaf community, for the deaf community to know what I'm talking about, and for the public to know what I'm talking about. If I hide that in a DEI meeting, then the public doesn't know that. They don't know what I'm talking about. The deaf community doesn't know what I'm talking about. And I represent them. It's my responsibility in deaf culture to put my hand up and speak using my voice or signing for their rights all the time. Whenever I serve as a representative for the deaf, I'm going to put my hand up and talk about the deaf. Where is the data for the deaf in these PowerPoints, in these statistics? It's my duty. I don't want to sometimes, but I must, even if I get in trouble for it with hearing people. You may not like the time used, but it's not time wasted. It's not. So really, I think we need sometimes for people that are diverse, put their hands up and talk about things in government board meetings.
Thank you, David.
Thank you all. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, there's an echo. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to say thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts and taking the time to engage in this conversation. I just wanted to clarify a couple of points. So the intention of this equity training, like Karen and like Diana were saying, is to provide that space outside of regular CAB meetings where we can dive into deeper discussions, really get to know each other on a personal level and figure out how we can better serve our community. Because yes, it's really great to have these conversations during regular CAB meetings, but unfortunately we also have a lot of business that we need to get done. We have a limited amount of time. So the point of this additional space was to really create that time for those in-depth conversations. And then also to Ernie's question about how does an equity focus relate to the CAAB? The purpose of the CAAB is to serve low income and marginalized populations in Clark County. And that at its very, very heart is an equity issue. People in our community are disproportionately impacted by poverty based on race, based on identity, based on disability status, based on mental health, based on the region that they live in. And that is really the heart of what we're trying to address through Clark County Community Services, through the anti-poverty funding that we receive. And so on the CAAB, you all make decisions about how that funding is distributed and the programs that the county is going to run, which, like I said, at its very, very heart is an equity issue, which is why we're taking so much time to really dive deep and figure out how we can better serve the people who need it most through an equity lens. And just to kind of summarize the conversation that the executive team was having, essentially we received a lot of feedback from folks about, the mandatory requirements of this training and having it not being voted on by the board. People were disappointed that it wasn't a group decision. And so based on that feedback, the executive team decided to, have this conversation and essentially reduce the punitive measures for not attending meetings, but just because there isn't any, punishment for not attending the equity trainings doesn't mean that it is not very, very encouraged as board members to attend. This is really important work. It's an excellent opportunity for us all to get to know each other better, and it's really going to make us better board members and a better board moving forward. So we really highly encourage you to attend, and I do need people to let me know if they're not planning to attend, just like regular meetings, just for planning. So Mark Caroline knows how many snacks to bring, and we know how to set up the room, etc.
And Abby, this is Alicia. I just want to make sure I address something. And David, this is specifically to you because when you've had made your first initial comments, you stated that you felt like you were being put on the spot and that those were private emails. And I just want to make sure every CAB member knows that when you include a majority of members of this board on an email, it becomes public record. It is not private. Like everything we do is in a public setting. This is an open public meeting. So I just wanted to make sure, David, that you knew if you wanted to have private conversations, make sure there aren't a quorum of board members in those emails. That would be really important because all of this, as you know, if a public record is made, would be disclosable to anybody in the community. So just wanted to make sure that that was really clear.
Okay, then we'll follow up with Alicia. Since it's open public record, I am happy for deaf people and any diverse people to see what I said because I was very serious about what I said, but I don't want to hurt individuals. I want to give them the opportunity to contact me for what they did not do that was discriminatory and oppressive to me as a deaf representative for the CAAB and in general. And that's one of the reasons I will not be going to these meetings. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Abby, for bringing up that it was brought up that we did not have a democratic open debate of all CAB members or a democratic vote regarding this. And that's what we're doing today. So very important. Thank you.
All right, any other discussion about this topic? I believe someone mentioned making it a requirement. Is that something there is interest with the board and something that we're able to do is have a vote? Is that possible? I'm not sure what the protocol is, or if it sounds like this is a really critical, the majority of folks have expressed interest in this commitment to equity training. I mean, it's the first bullet point in our code of conduct that was drafted to uphold the CAAB's commitment to equity. And I would think that having that foundational understanding, having those agreements that will be discussed and really delved into with these trainings, you know, shows that commitment to equity. So I'm not sure where to go from here, to be honest.
Melanie,
So-
this is Alicia. I would ask Abby and you, since we've lost several members of the CAAB due to the time, if we wanted to amend the agenda and postpone the discussion around the bylaws, and then we could open that question up as we're considering what our bylaws say at the next meeting.
Yeah, I was wondering if we lost quorum. The next action agenda item. So Abby, is that something we can push to our next meeting so that we have quorum for the discussion and potential approval of the code of conduct and bylaws revisions?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just counting and it does look like we have lost quorum, so we can definitely push this to the next meeting and take a vote about whether we want the future equity trainings to be mandatory. For the October meeting, since we won't have a chance to take a vote then, I think we can continue saying that, you know, meetings are highly encouraged, but there won't be any punitive measures taken for non-attendance. And then, yes, we can push the discussion to a vote next time in accordance with the vote of the conduct and bylaws revisions.
Great, thank you. So that saves us a little bit of time since we're going to push that to our November meeting. Do we want to have a January meeting discussion? Abby, is there, would you like to lead that, please?
Yeah, I'm happy to lead that. One more note on the equity training, just reminder that we do have compensation available for low-income CAAB members. We can offer $200 food vouchers, childcare, and transportation. So far, only one member has taken me up on that. So please reach out if you would like to receive any of that compensation, or if there's anything else that you need to make these trainings more accessible. Please feel free to reach out to me. All right, so we're skipping this. Okay, so just briefly, for those who are new to the CAAB, every January we hold a longer two-part meeting to cover yearly board business and provide opportunity for additional board development. For this coming January, the first part will be 3 hours and will involve standard board business, our yearly update from Vanessa, the Community Services Director, election of the executive committee, planning for the year, etc. And then the second part will be a request for application training to prepare for the next round of funding applications. And for those who don't know, I mentioned this earlier, but we open community action and homeless crisis response system funding for applications every 3 years. And applications are reviewed by the CAAB and scored to determine who will receive funding for the next 3-year cycle. So we will be doing an in-depth training to prepare you all for this application review and scoring process.
I'm sorry to let you know, the interpreter said something about that they had to go. Did you not tell them it was a 2-hour meeting? No.
It's for 2 hours. I think just the second interpreter has to go, but we have another.
The second interpreter?
So, hi, this is the interpreter. We were only scheduled until 10:30.
That's what I thought. You did not tell them it was 2-hour meetings now, so I did not misunderstand.
I thought I updated that in the system, but I will make sure to do that for the next meeting. All right, so we usually hold CAAB meetings on the first Wednesday of each month, but for next year, New Year's Day is falling on the first Wednesday of the year, so we'll need to move the meeting.
Abby, I'm going to ask the chair that we postpone further discussion until the next board meeting, including the January meeting, because we no longer have interpreters for one of our members.
Okay, for sure, no problem.
Thank you. So,
All right,
Melanie,
yes.
I move to adjourn. Sorry.
Wonderful, thank you. All right.
There's no public
All right.
comment.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Apologies.
Do we need to open for public comment briefly?
Yes.
I think, okay. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak? Hearing none, we will get an email with from Abby regarding the next trainings. But you can see those on the agenda that was sent out. Our next equity training is Wednesday, October 2nd from 9 to 11. And our regular meeting is Wednesday, November 6th from 9 to 11. More information will follow via email since we have communication issues. So apologies, and thank you everyone for attending, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you. Thanks, Alicia.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
November.